और सीधे आपको ले चलते हैं नॉर्थ ब्लॉक, जहां पर केंद्रीय वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली प्रेस को संबोधित कर रहे हैं.
Which are recommended by the GST Council. So effectively the council is the drafting body, because the council comprising of the states and the centre, together there is a pooled sovereignty where whatever is approved by the council then goes to the respective legislative bodies for approval. And therefore it is extremely important that the drafting body whose recommendations are final applies itself. So for the last 2-3 days we've been of the meetings, the last meeting and the present one, the 4th, 5th and the 5th, 6th and the 7th meeting, we've been concentrating on these drafts. So the primary draft of CGST and the SGST law, comprising of 197 provisions and 5 schedules, has been approved. There were some portions which were left out, on which either some representation was made by a state government or we could not reach a consensus. So today morning we went into each one of those issues, and many of those issues have been sorted out. And now with regard to the draft, only a few issues remain. Only those blanks are there which relates to dual control and cross empowerment. Subject to that, the rest of the draft has been approved, but it would still be required that since changes are made in the meeting, the language has to be given a legal shape, and therefore the legally vetted copy of the draft will be circulated to all the states. Now the CGST and the SGST drafts are to be approved, the CGST by the Parliament and the SGST by all the state legislatures. These two laws will be a mirror image of each other. So that's one important step which we have completed. A significant headway has been made. Thereafter we had to go into this whole issue of the compensation law. Now on the compensation law, it is clear that the states will be compensated to the extent of 100% of loss which is directly attributable to GST implementation for a period of 5 years. And therefore we had already spent 2 or 3 days discussing the compensation package earlier. Now in terms of what we had discussed earlier, to give it an implementation shape, the compensation law is to be approved only by the central parliament. So the basic draft of that has been approved. Now there were one clause in particular with regard to the source of the compensation fund, which language will be redrafted, and the legally vetted language will be placed before the next meeting of the council. So that once those legally vetted drafts are approved in both the cases and a consensus is reached on that language, then we can put this law also behind us. That leaves us with a very important work of the IGST law and the cross empowerment. Now, the two principal issues involved in the IGST law, one is relating to the definition of the territory of the state itself. It's a matter of constitutional interpretation. We'll have to discuss this and reach a decision. The second, whether the IGST powers under the Act are with the central government, or can those powers be shared? This is the second issue. And this is directly linked to the issue of how the division of authority for the implementation of the GST is to take place between the assessing machinery of the center and the state, which is the cross empowerment and the dual authority issue. So these two issues will now be taken together. So if you were to ask me what are the principal items which are now residuary items left, the main item is of course the IGST and the dual empowerment issue. The secondary is the legally vetted language which will be placed in the next meeting. And for this purpose, we'll be again meeting for 2 full days on the 3rd and the 4th of January for this purpose. And of course, there is the other parallel exercise which will be the rates committee, which will consequently be working on the rates itself. Since that's also within the domain of the council, once we are able to do this entire work, then the recommendation of the rates committee will come up before the future meeting of the council itself. So on the next meeting, this key issue of IGST and dual control will come up before the council.
So when will these laws be taken up in the parliament? By next session will be?
You see, first of all, let the council has to approve the legally vetted language, and after that, whenever the parliament and the state assemblies move, the council will decide that they are now ripe for being placed before the legislative bodies.
So these laws were to be finalized in the winter session itself. The industry says that it will require some 3-4 months once these laws turn into rules and acts. So what will be the consequent impact on the timeline?
You see, that we will decide once we've crossed all bridges. I'm not going to bind myself with anything. Our effort is to do it as quickly as possible, and I think we are making a reasonable headway.
सर ड्यूअल कंट्रोल में अब क्या बड़ा इशू क्या अभी उनका स्टेट्स की तरफ से क्या उठाया गया है?
देखिए, आज तो कोई इशू नहीं उठा, क्योंकि आज पिछली मीटिंग में और आज की मीटिंग में तो हम लेजिस्लेशंस पे ही वर्क कर रहे थे. स्वाभाविक है कि जो इशू है कि जो ऑडिट करने का अधिकार है, जो ऑडिट केसेस आएंगे, उस अधिकार का प्रयोग राज्य और केंद्र के बीच में किस प्रकार से होगा, और उसके पीछे उद्देश्य यह है कि दोनों के पास एक असेसिंग मशीनरी है, और अभी हम उस स्टेज पे नहीं पहुंचे कि हम लोगों के पास एक जॉइंट ब्यूरोक्रेसी हो या एक फेडरल ब्यूरोक्रेसी हो. कानून एक है लेकिन ब्यूरोक्रेसीज 2 हैं, और इसलिए उसकी मैनेजमेंट के लिए, ऑडिटिंग मैनेजमेंट के लिए वो अधिकार क्षेत्र कैसे बटेंगे.
केंद्र के पास क्या इस बारे में कोई फॉर्मूला है जो इसको सुलझाने?
देखिए, ये एक डेलिबरेटिव तरीके से रिजॉल्व होता है, और जिस तरह मेरा अभी तक 7 मीटिंगों का अनुभव है, 2-2, 3-3 दिन की मीटिंगें भी हुई हैं, कि जीएसटी काउंसिल की मीटिंग पूरा दिन चलती है और एक एक विषय को लेकर घंटों घंटे बहस होती है, और बहस का स्तर भी बहुत अच्छा है. लोग तैयार होकर आते हैं, गहराई से बहस करते हैं, और वो उसमें फिर ऑल्टरनेटिव सुझाव आते हैं, और प्रायः उद्देश्य सबका ये है कि एक दूसरे को सुनने के बाद कोई वाया मीडिया जिसमें ज्यादा तर्क और वजन हो उसको हम लोग मान लेते हैं. अभी तक कोई भी निर्णय वोट से नहीं हुआ, कोई भी निर्णय अगर मैं कहूं गिव एंड टेक से भी नहीं हुआ कि हम समझौता कर लेते हैं कि तुम 2 बात मेरी मान लो, मैं 2 बात तुम्हारी मान लेता हूं, इस आधार पे भी नहीं हुआ. डिस्कशन के बाद जो बहस में से ज्यादा रैशनल निकलता है, तर्क निकलता है, उस आधार पे फिर सब लोग मान जाते हैं कि यही उचित लगता है.
सर एक और सवाल है कि नोटबंदी के बाद ज्यादातर राज्य सरकारें करें कि उन्हें मुआवजा ज्यादा मिलना चाहिए, क्योंकि उनकी
देखिए, आप मुआवजा इस कानून और संविधान संशोधन में है, उसका ताल्लुक सिर्फ जीएसटी इंप्लीमेंटेशन से है और किसी विषय से नहीं है. मतलब कल को अगर ज्यादा पैसा रेवेन्यूज में आ जाता है और बैंकिंग सिस्टम में आ जाता है और रेवेन्यू ज्यादा इकट्ठा हो जाता है, तो उसका इस पे कोई असर नहीं.
Getting to also hear that probably some tweaking will be required in the law further to allow quicker payment to state governments in terms of.
Yes, we have decided that
2 months.
There was a debate between 1 month or 3 months, and finally we found that compensation will be payable to the states every 2 months.
Sir, are you hopeful that you will be able to roll out from 1st April?
Well, I am trying my best to do that.
But given the present trend, you should be able to meet the target if all goes well.
Well, I am trying my best, that's all. I don't want to hasten the process of discussion. I don't want to delay the process of
But your
implementation.
target remains 1st April?
Well, left to myself, I'd like to.
So just one more tiny question. So also in terms of the revenue compensation, like we already assumed that growth of 14%. So, in terms of the compensation, so would that be a bit of a challenge for us? Because states will be sitting pretty because it's a constitutional commitment for the next 5 years. But looking like...
No, I have no reason to believe that states will deliberately not collect their revenue. There is no reason to assume that. Every state will honestly try to collect as much revenue. Just for the sake of getting compensation, they can't hurt their own revenue collections. No state will ever try and do that. I don't think it's a fair comment of the states itself.
So this audit,
as
which
far as the
agency?
base-
Audit is which agency now? It's finally.
Sir, has there been any discussion about changing the base year for compensation
No.
2015-16?
No.
Continues to be.
सर जीएसटी की इतनी मीटिंगें करनी पड़ रही हैं और रिमोनेटाइजेशन और इमिडिटी भी दूसरे काम में लगे हुए हैं, तो बजट प्रिपरेशन के लिए टाइम नहीं पा रहा।
नहीं, हम बजट प्रिपरेशन भी चल रहा है और 3 और 4 तारीख की मीटिंग का जो दूसरा भाग होगा उसमें मैं स्टेट फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स के साथ बजट कंसल्टेशन भी करने वाला हूँ।
And is there a cap, sir, on compensation like 50,000 per year?
No, there is no cap.
And no cap.
Do you fear, sir, that somewhere down the line, a political line will, because of the demonetization?
We are living in a real world and politics is a part of that real world. But at the end of the day, one has to assume that elected representatives in center and state have a sense of responsibility. And so far, despite initial divergence of views, it all ends with convergence. That's been the experience, and I think that's one of the great advantages of deliberative democracy. Thank you.